everybody. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what men and women like based on the physical appearance. And I think I may have the key to both men and women based on their appearance. So I'm going to start off with the movie that I'm just recently watching called Scent of a Woman it features Al Pacino. And in this movie, Al Pacino, he wants to kill himself, his character. And there's been two times in this movie so far, I haven't finished watching it, where he's making reference to his hair, right? And basically, the insinuation here is that ultimately what women like in men is their hair, right? Like how well kept their hair is, if it's nicely combed, nicely kept. um, and I can kind of confirm this with like the first episode of my favorite series ever, House of Cards, where Frank Underwood, the main protagonist, played by Kevin Spacey, he's in his car, and he's in politics and everything, so he needs to look good all of the time. And his wife Claire, played by Robin Wright, is right next to him, and she's staring at him, and like the enigma that she is, she embodies that archetype in that moment. She's being critical of him, and I think she kind of touches his hair, or I don't remember if she does that, but she says, "You need a haircut," right? And his hair is like, it looks good, but or it's not bad, but she sees that, right? And it's like keeping that appearance, right? Keeping that good style. But it may also be something that just women like in general. They want to see a man with nice hair, right? And you can kind of think about this maybe in terms of, I don't know, people or men that struggle with women, right? That have that attitude of like, no woman talks to me, right? Like, I'm alone, I don't have a girlfriend. And I could probably say, like, as a tip or as a general guideline, get a nice haircut, and not only a nice haircut, like an attractive haircut, right? Like long hair, weird hairstyles, that men like. We like those styles, like, bald down here and then like up top and faded and things like that. Women don't really like that. I mean, think Harvey Specter in Suits, right? Or Mike in Suits, right? Like nicely combed, right? Um, yeah, and kind of like up to date, right? I think that's key. um Now I'm going to get into the other side of things, which is what men like in women, in physical appearance. And I think both of these things work at a very unconscious level, but they're there. I think if they're not the most important aspects, they are the most basic aspects. Men like skin, and I'm not talking specifically about skin color as much as I am about skin quality, right? And I'm not really, I don't really know much about skin or about how well kept it should be, but just based on looks, right? I think the skin in a woman needs to look um, like well kept, well maintained, kind of like the haircut or the hair in a man needs to look, just appear, right? Because this is based on appearance. This is based on the first contact with a person, the physical appearance, which we know is not very typically appreciated in our society, right? We try to distance ourselves from that type of talk of, physical appearance matters, or, don't judge a book by its cover. But I mean, we got to be honest with ourselves. We do judge a book by its cover. It's the only way in which we know at first what the other person is about, right? We do that. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. But I had this idea from Harry Potter, which was written by a woman, by J.K. Rowling. And there's a scene where, I think in the sixth book, in the sixth movie, Harry and Ron are talking about who they like. And if you guys have watched Harry Potter, or read the books, you know that Harry ends up with Ron's sister, with Ginny, and Ron ends up with their best friend, one of their best friends, with it, which is Hermione Granger, right? So they're in their beds and they're talking about uh, they start talking about them. Well, they start talking about Hermione, I think at first, and I think Ron says Hermione has nice skin, right? And they're just kind of like, what? And then Harry says, well, Ginny has nice skin, right? And I thought it was hilarious, but at the same time, it's kind of like key. Why are they talking about skin? Why would J.K. Rowling, a woman, make these two male characters in her book talk about the people they eventually end up marrying at the end of the series, make them talk about skin, about them liking their skin, right? And it just kind of hit me in that moment. Those are some of those revelation moments in movies where I had the same thing in the third Batman movie with I forget his name, but it's a scene between Batman and Catwoman, and Catwoman says goodbye to Batman before he goes off and takes the bomb into the middle of the river in the last movie. I think it's Batman Rises or something like that. The one after the Joker one. And and then there's another guy that after Catwoman says goodbye to Batman, he comes up to Batman and tells him, "I don't really care who you are," and he tells him other things. But that "I don't really care who you are" was like a moment for me of revelation where women actually like who the man is, not so much appearance, right, but who they are, right, what their profession is, what they're about, right. And men care more about the physical appearance. Obviously we all know that distinction between men and women. um, but yeah, that revelation, and that, and I don't think these writers try to make revelations. I think that they just take it for granted and they say that's just a given, kind of like right now in Scent of a Woman, where they're talking about a man's hair, right? I think they just think that. Or in House of Cards, when Claire tells Frank, like, you need a haircut. I think these writers that write these movies and these books, maybe they're not aware of the insight that their movies or stories are telling us, right? These pearls of wisdom that are in there, they may just say, yeah, that's a given. Everybody knows that. But it's like, no, everybody doesn't know that. I mean, especially when you're young, you struggle with that, right? You're trying to get a boyfriend or girlfriend, and you don't know what changes to make in yourself to be able to achieve that goal you have. And I think that it's key to know these things, right? Men like skin in women, and women like haircut, or the haircut, the nice haircuts in men. Now I'm gonna get a little bit into why this is, because I was like, why is this, right? And what is the history, for example? What correlations are there between haircuts and skin? Which we could say one obvious one is like women need to appear pure, right? Maybe that's what beauty is about, like impeccableness, no hair, because hair is could be attributed to like a male masculine strength quality, right? Like hair, we know, protects you from the cold, right? Like if you're think about the gatherers or the hunter gatherers, like in primitive times, men needed to go out and hunt the food, right? Hunt for food, hunt animals. And sometimes they were out there for a long time, so they would get cold. So then the hair, right, it's an evolution idea that hair is there to protect us from, like sweat or the weather. um, and in women, this I guess it shouldn't be a thing, right, because women need to appear pure and beautiful. um, so then my question was like, how come women have long hair, right? Like, what's the deal with long hair? And it could be because since they aren't supposed to have, like women shave their legs and stuff, they aren't supposed to have hair in any other part of their body. They concentrate all their hair in one area, which is, the lengthy hair that women typically have in our traditional culture, right? Yeah, and they say things are changing. It's not always going to be the same thing. But I'm going to get into some ideas that actually contradict that notion. Um, um, yeah, and why do men have short hair? There is an explanation for this too, and I'm going to get into it in a moment. Um, But basically, I was also thinking about like the founding fathers, right? Like how the founding fathers had wigs, right? And I think a lot of them were going bald. I mean, there were young people and old people in that era, like in think American Revolution times, where the young people had hair underneath their wigs and the old people didn't, right? Because they were old, they would lose their hair, and but all of them were wearing wigs, right? And the wigs were kind of like bushy, right? So it was like, why are you wearing a wig with hair? Where historically and culturally, excuse me, I asked ChatGPT about this, and basically, like for example, the Greeks and the Romans saw long hair as a sign of wealth, right? And the slaves and the military men had short hair, right, for practical reasons. So I kind of thought about how, like, back in those days, I don't remember specifically in what era of history. You can let me know if you know in the comments. Um, Fat people or people that were big were seen as people that were wealthy. It was a sign of wealth, right? Like, I have enough money, I can feed myself and overfeed myself, even, right? Like, I'm not poor or broke, right? And I think that's maybe what long hair kind of symbolized. But then it did make kind of like a transition, especially I think in medieval Europe, where then long hair was now considered like a beautiful aspect of women, right? Like, and I think from there we just kind of stuck with that idea that long hair in women looks beautiful. Um, of course, the short hair in men is highly influenced by the military, because in the military, or men that had to do industrious hard labor work, they, for practical reasons again, and in the military, they needed to have short hair. So then I guess it just becomes a thing where men no longer are wearing wigs or have long hair. They just need to have short hair, right? But yes, and a lot of you are probably gonna say, yeah, but that's, you know old ideas. Like, nowadays we live in like the free society and whatever, and we can do whatever we want and be whoever we want. And if we look back in history, I'll say, well, actually, it doesn't really work like that. There are cycles. Society and culture goes through cycles. And ChatGPT kind of gave me these ideas where he says, think about the flappers in the 1920s. So I was like, what the hell are flappers? And if you type in flappers in 1920s, these women are gonna pop up, right? And we kind of know that in the 1920s is when there were a lot of women's protests, feminism picked up, and women got the right to vote, right? But the flappers were like, I saw these pictures of like these 4 or 5 women drinking, with those. Think Daisy in The Great Gatsby, right? That's a flapper. And flappers were women with very short hair, right? And it was kind of like a revolutionary thing, right? Where they were kind of saying like, we're not gonna conform to society standards, right? We're gonna make our own thing. You want us with long hair? We have short hair, right? And now we go 40 years into the future, with the hippies in the 1960s, where now men are having long hair, right? Again, the military, men have short hair, and we're not going to conform to society standards. Guess what? We're going to have long hair, right? Men, like, rebelling in this way, right? But again, those things were just momentarily, because eventually social conventions reassert themselves, right? And we go back to the ideas, to the old ideas, to the long-standing ideas that we know of, that we still kind of operate under today, which is women with long hair and men with short hair, right? And I kind of have this idea. I don't know if I'm gonna make a video on it in the future, where I think there have been people that have written books on this, on how, like, society and culture goes through cycles, cycles where like everything's calm, and then things start to pick up, get a little bit wild, and then there are eras. I would say specifically decades that are wild, where we think it's going to be the end of the world, and a lot of things are going on, like bad things like in the government, corruption and things like that. But then they kind of like calm down after a couple years, and then we're back to a calm state, right? It kind of goes from like order to chaos, order to chaos. And every time it's, I think recently, last decade, specifically in the 2010s, we went through very wild, turbulent times, like chaotic times, especially with technology and, COVID and Donald Trump and just like all these things like apocalyptic, starting with like 2012, right, where we thought it was going to be like the end of the year based on the Mayan calendar and all those things. And now the 2020s, I would say it's like an era of calming down. So let me just kind of like give you the idea here. Um, the theory goes like in the 1920s, things were relatively calm, and in the 2000s, they started to kind of like pick up. In the 2010s, things were wild, and now in the 2020s, things are calming down. And this idea could be kind of like translated, if you see it, it's like a generation, 40 years, from the 1950s where things were relatively calm. In the 60s, they pick up, right? Especially with Vietnam and the hippies. In the 70s, they're wild. And you can think the Watergate scandal, corruption in the government, Tlatelolco in 1968 in Mexico, right? Well, that was 68 heading towards the 70s. And then in the 80s, they kind of like chill out, right? Kind of like we are now in the 2020s. And there's like a fashion explosion, kind of. But then if we go back even further, especially with the 1920s, where the flappers were going around, feminism was at its peak, right? We do have things like this, right? But then the question would be like, so you're telling me the 1940s we were calming down in the middle of World War II? And I wouldn't really say in the beginning of the 1940s, but maybe towards the end of the 1940s, post World War II, yeah, things were probably calming down right there. Okay, but anyway, I'm not gonna get into that right now because I haven't even like really thought about it, but I just kind of wanted to let you know. Let me know if you know of any authors, any books that talk about the cycle of culture, because I think there is a cycle, and we shouldn't really look at it as like the end of an era or the end of the world, but more of in terms of we're finishing a cycle and we're gonna start it up again, and things are kind of like this throughout history. So as a tip, I thought about this just to conclude this video. What if you're a person that's like bald or has no hair? And we can see that people typically that are bald or have no hair, that are men, have a beard, right? And they kind of like trim their beard and they have a nice little beard going on. And I think that's another way of men showing that maybe masculinity, if that's the right word to use here, that type of strength, or I don't know what women like or what other people like in men. And yeah, I think the beard would be a good option. But yeah, like totally cut your hair, because I saw that in myself. I used to have like long crazy hair, and I used to kind of do my own thing with my hair. Didn't really care about it. But then I said, you know what? I'm gonna get a nice haircut. I'm going to a barber. I did, and then I got a girlfriend. So there's a tip for all men, I think. And yeah, just lastly, I think that's why ultimately women take care of their skin. Women are always talking about like, lotion, and, putting lotion on their skin, and, if they have dry skin or if they have oily skin, whatever, like trying to remedy their skin. Men aren't really that into their skin as women are. I think that's kind of like a known thing. But that would be the reason why, right? Because men ultimately like skin, and women specifically, right? This is just talking on a physical appearance level. I'm not getting deep into any other type of ordeal like psychological or emotional. Of course, all of that matters, especially once you get a relationship going with a person. But in the beginning, I think those are, again, I'll repeat it, if not the most important, the most basic or fundamental things. So let me know what you think about these ideas. I could be wrong. And that's all I got for this video. So I'll see you in the next one. All right. Peace.